belong you. Because you're mine. You better stop the things that you're doing. I said watch out, I ain't lying. Yeah. In this video, I'm just going to talk about quite literally one day and one experience. And I've sort of talked about this a little bit, but I want to put this in context because for years I have tried to understand what happened. Why did I lose my shit, if you will, like I did? And why was that so disruptive to my life, and why was that so necessary? And the answer to all of those things will come a little bit later as this unwinds. If I were to classify where we are, I would say that up until now, we're the phase of learning, experiencing, doing, just living. And in this phase, we're going to talk about much more experiencing of the phenomenon, or whatever it might be going on. It was early, I think January or February of 2009, I was doing my marketing plan. I think I've talked about this just a little bit. And I was watching a video, actually I was sitting there doing my marketing plan, as I try to do every year. And I had no idea how to create that marketing plan. And so one of the things that I did was I went searching for YouTube videos. I mean, YouTube was actually fairly new back in 2009, and believe it or not, you could actually search for things and find it back then. And I came across a YouTube channel called Inflation Nation, National Inflation Association's channel, and where I had never heard or really experienced the story about the Federal Reserve. Here I was confronted with the cause of the financial crash that I had we all were just going through at the time. And suddenly I had context that I hadn't had.
Under the false pretenses of trying to get our phony economy to recover, the Federal Reserve is giving trillions of dollars away for free to bankers on Wall Street at the expense of the American middle class, who will soon see the purchasing power of their savings disappear. The false strength of our phony economy has become dependent on easy money and cheap credit from the Federal Reserve. The longer the Federal Reserve waits to raise interest rates, the greater the chances that our economy will overdose on excess liquidity. There will be...
And one of those contexts was around inflation. And one of the things that one of the videos said is it comes to a fairly abrupt stop and says something to the effect, 73% of our economy is a consumer economy. What happens when that economy can no longer afford to consume? And I didn't want the answer from the video. I stopped the video. And I asked myself, as I do sometimes, these open-ended questions, just whatever you want to present me. It's often worked quite well just to do that. And in this case, I had a flood of it was more information and embedded in there than I think I could really, get my hands around. And in that moment, like I often do, I felt this deep need to do something. And so from that moment forward, you could say that I began a brand new pattern. In fact, just from that very specific moment, I can tell you that I'm here today because of it. It was that impactful. I spent the next 3 or 4 years trying to convince people around me that there was an economic crash coming. Most people didn't care. Nobody really wanted to know what the Federal Reserve was. They certainly didn't care whether the Constitution was being followed or not. And so, it was a tough pattern to start. Years later, in fact, in the last year, I was reading the analysis and assessment of the gateway process. And in here, I think I found the answer to what happened. And it can be, simply synopsized like this from the paper. This comes under the technique of patterning. Quote, "This technique involves the use of consciousness to achieve desired objectives in the physical, emotional, and intellectual sphere. It involves concentration on the desired objective while in a focus 12 state, extension of the individual's perception of that objective into the whole expanded consciousness, and its projection into the universe with the intention that the desired objective is already a matter of established achievement, which is destined to be realized within the time frame specified. This particular methodology is based on the belief that the thought patterns generated by our consciousness in a state of expanded awareness create holograms which represent the situation we desire to bring about, and in so doing establish the basis for actual realization of that goal. Once the thought-generated hologram of the sought-after objective is established in the universe, it becomes an aspect of reality which interacts with the universal hologram to bring about the desired objective, which might not, under other circumstances, ever occur. In other words, the technique of patterning recognizes the fact that since consciousness is the source of all reality, our thoughts have the power to influence the development of reality in space-time as it applies to us, if those thoughts can be projected with adequate intensity. However, the more complicated the objective sought, and the more radically it departs from the current reality, the more time the universal hologram will need to reorient our reality sphere to accommodate our desires. Monroe trainers caution against attempting to force the pace of this process, because the individual could succeed in dislocating his existing reality with drastic consequences. So there you go. If I were to describe what began in 2009 and peaked somewhere around 2014, it was this patterning. And I want to lay out one part of this because I had to look at this and go, oh my God, look what I've done, and I felt really bad. But what they're describing here is the ability for the consciousness to create a pattern in order to create an outcome in the future, and in some ways and to some extent that includes whether I know what it is or not. Once that future becomes extant and my actions are patterned, then we're on that path. Authenticity here in your intent is key. And one of the things that I would learn over the next half a dozen years or so was that my desire to be wealthy, to have physical wealth and material things, was going to keep me from manifesting the future that I desired, which I just desire a world where my kids can grow up and be happy and safe, where people around me are cared for, where my contribution to a better world is meaningful, and where the problems that we face are actually solved and done so in a compassionate way, without handcuffs or a cage. I dislocated myself, and you will discover just how funny that is right around 2012 when I get laid off and I start writing my book. It was very much like I had a spell put on me at that moment, and perhaps it was my higher self who put that spell on me. And if it was, I'm very grateful for what I did to myself. Because in every way, what I see is a world of hope, where what I only saw was a world of pain and fear. I see a world that lets go of many of the things that hold us back from being a whole and full person and people. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit about my travels and where I've been, because it's important, just kind of on a general level, to talk about some of the places around the world that I've had this, fantastic opportunity to go visit, and begin to realize that not everywhere in the world was like America. And although we can understand that from pictures and movies and such, until you're sitting in a bar in Dublin and you're wondering why you don't have Wi-Fi, you start to understand what they don't have overseas and what we do. With that, I thank you guys very much for your time this week. I hope you have a wonderful and a blessed week, and I will see you soon. Peace. Yeah! I ain't gonna take none of your fooling around. I ain't gonna take none of your